You are Locked On Pistons Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Detroit, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Man, another game in Charlotte, another narrow defeat. Welcome into a live Locked On Pistons postcast. I am your host, Jake Rietma, and Detroit falls in overtime on the road against Charlotte, 123-121. This was a heartbreaker. No way around it. Felt like this was one the Pistons could get. We'll go over where they had the chances and really mounted an impressive comeback overall. But in the end, they did not get it done. So we'll go over that, talk about Cade Cunningham's injury in this one. Unfortunately, he did not play in overtime after leaving the game with an injury. We'll discuss the latest there. And as always, wrap it up with our studs and duds. That's what's coming up on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. As always, thank you for making the Locked On Pistons postcast your post-game destination, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, all on YouTube as well, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team each and every day, an extension of the Locked On Pistons, and this is your post-game destination. We do post-game shows after Lions games, after Pistons games, after Tigers games, after Michigan football games, and it's all on Locked On Sports Detroit. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube at Locked On Sports Detroit, and we've been telling you all about it, so by now you know that your favorite podcast has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Pistons daily newsletters, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage, delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. Thanks so much for everybody that tunes in post-game, because that's what an instant reaction show is all about. Game ends, we hop on here and we break it down. We riff, we raff, we commiserate, we commemorate, you name it. Shout out to the everydayers, and shout out to Q on Locked On Pistons Daily. And for the latest, you can always check out the Locked On Pistons Daily podcast as well, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Today's show is brought to you by and made possible by GameTime. That's right. By now, you know that GameTime is the ultimate ticket application. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. If you're going to a live event, you gotta use GameTime. Now, this is a strange game because I almost turned it off. I wanted to, with how bad this game started for the Pistons, and that third quarter was brutal, and Brandon Miller and Lamelo Ball, it seems like we're just having fun at the Pistons' expense, and there was not a lot of life from the Pistons. So I give them credit for fighting back from an enormous deficit, tying the game, and eventually forcing overtime. But it's about getting over the hump. It's about taking that next step. And you look at the 2-game sample size, first with the loss to Chicago, now the loss to the Charlotte Hornets. Those are two very winnable games. And instead, the Pistons are now 7-10, as opposed to having a chance to be at that 500 mark. And it still feels like a little bit of an uphill battle. But let's break down the end of that game, because obviously where it went wrong down the stretch and then into overtime, because you had a tie game with a minute to go. And that's when Cade drove to the basket, was fouled. It was part of a 10-0 run. And the 2 free throws, put the Pistons back in the game. And even though Cade was injured on that play, I thought it just was kind of the finishing touches on a really impressive 10-0 run to tie the game with a minute to go. And then Lamelo Ball, you got to give him a lot of credit. He had a tremendous game. He ties it back up with the 2-point bucket. And then at the end of regulation, man, this was tough to watch, because Malik Beasley got not one, but 2 really good looks at the rim, couldn't get either to go. And it just would have been a poetic ending to this one if the Pistons could have somehow won the game by a putback basket, just the same way that the Hornets won the first matchup between the Pistons and Hornets in Charlotte with the comeback win and the putback bucket at the Horn, which is exactly what Malik Beasley had a chance to do, but did not end up going that way. Now, all that said, in overtime, kind of a little bit wonky when you think, okay, the Pistons are without Cade Cunningham, and then Lamelo Ball fouls out right at the beginning of the overtime session. So both teams kind of without for sure the Pistons without their best player. Brandon Miller, you could make the case, was the Hornets' best player tonight. But in overtime, a couple of instances, Brandon Miller hits that deep three-pointer after the inbounds play as the shot clock sounds. And you just got to figure out a way to avoid and not let that happen, defend better. And I know he made a tremendous shot, and sometimes guys just make plays in the National Basketball Association, but it felt like that was a backbreaker because that put up Charlotte up 4 with a minute and a half to play. Now, Jaden Ivey did have an impressive three-pointer when the Pistons were down 6 to pull within 3. And again, this was a game where the Pistons never gave up, but it's just the way it played out, kind of, two different school of thoughts, if you will, when the Pistons were down 3 with about 29 seconds to go, and they elected to foul, and instead of just play it out and try and get a stop and then, have about 5 seconds to work with. So, I don't know if there's necessarily one way or the wrong way to go about it, but it was very clear when the Pistons were down 3 that Charlotte elected to foul. And I think that's one of the instances. I used to have this in my bio on Twitter. If you're up 3 under 10 seconds to play, foul. I mean, you don't want to let the opposition tie the game with a three-pointer. And so for the Hornets to implement the foul there, you got to give them credit, because and you can disagree with me in the comments, but I think that's a no-brainer. And sure, there's things that can go wrong, but I think there's more that can go wrong if you allow the opposition to get a look from beyond the arc. And in today's game, guys are so good at shooting. So I give the Hornets credit there for fouling. Now, interesting point from Greg Kessler on the broadcast that, Jaden Ivey makes the first, and whether or not with that amount of time left, I believe it was about 6 and change, do you make them both and then try and foul? Same thing. They elected to intentionally miss the free throw. And there is a strategic component to intentionally missing that free throw that Jaden Ivey, and maybe it's, again, it's an opinion here, but Greg Kessler on the broadcast said it's about that soft miss off the front of the iron maybe, or let it dance around the rim and try and get that tip in. But Ivey went with, the line drive miss to try to get that long rebound, and the Pistons had their chances. You could make the case that maybe Tobias Harris got fouled on that. Very curious your thoughts if you thought the Pistons got hoed a little bit on that, because I thought, with the scrum after the miss from Ivey, you're going to be hard pressed to get a whistle out of that unless it's something glaringly obvious. It wasn't, but you go back and watch it in slow-mo, maybe there was some contact on Tobias Harris. But other notes I took down, this was definitely a notepad game, if you will. Just taking lots of notes. If you don't believe me, there you go. For those watching on YouTube, the handwriting's not great, but when the Pistons commit as many turnovers as they did, you're going to be hard pressed to win a lot of games. And had they been able to pull this one out, it would have been the third time the Pistons committed 19 plus turnovers and still won a game, but that didn't happen. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but you just got to eliminate some of those empty possessions and some of those pointless turnovers that can be momentum changing turnovers. Cade, for as good as Cade played, he had some really costly turnovers again tonight. I think of the one that, and Isaiah Stewart too, not to rag on him, but he had a couple of passes off an offensive rebound. He's throwing it in, 10 rows up. It's like, what? And throwing, sliders low and away that are going between guys' legs. But for the game overall, for the Pistons, 19 turnovers, you got to find a way to clean that up. If you're JB Bickerstaff squad. Other notes that I took down, Jalen Duren didn't really get involved in this game until later in the fourth quarter to try to, come alive. And that's just, again, it felt like a little bit too little too late. The coach's challenge from JB Bickerstaff with 3:26 left on the foul on Lamelo Ball turned out to be a huge successful challenge and an overturn because Ball eventually fouls out. He was fighting foul trouble all night. And when, you're Lamelo Ball and you play as well as he did with 35 points and Brandon Miller with 38, if you can get him out of the game, that successful challenge was really impressive instance of, being on the ball as far as the coaching staff for this Detroit Pistons team. But want to get your thoughts as well. We'll do that next. We'll talk about the Cade Cunningham injury, what that means, and then continue to break down this one as the Pistons lose to the Charlotte Hornets. Final score 121-123. Don't go anywhere, because when we come back, we're taking your comments next on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. Hey, this episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by GameTime. Look, I love GameTime because it's A, easy to use, and B, it is the best in the business. If you're looking to go to an event, whether it be a concert, whether it be a sporting event, you want to go see the Pistons play at LCA, you name it. Maybe even it's something like the comedy show, theater, whatever it is. Maybe take your girlfriend or boyfriend out on a date. There's nothing better than a live event. And for that, you got to download the GameTime app, because it takes all of the stress out of buying tickets, because you can rest assured you're getting the best deal possible. We all love getting the best deal possible. GameTime, as the event gets closer, the price gets lower. And what I also love about GameTime, the all-in pricing. Now, you got to toggle this feature in the app, but it'll show you the total up front, because all those other ticketing apps tried to bamboozle you. You think you're getting a great deal, and then you go to check out and it's fee after fee after fee. Not with the all-in pricing on GameTime. When you toggle this feature, there's no surprise fees at checkout, so you know exactly what you're paying for. I also love the panoramic 360 seat views, so you can pull it up on the app and you see exactly what the view will be like from your seat. I actually just used the GameTime app for a little Big 12 football action in Morgantown, West Virginia, just because I love going to live events. Also, great thing about the GameTime ticket app is the coverage. Your purchase is coverage with the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON Pistons for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create that account and redeem the code Locked On Pistons. That's LOCKEDONPISTONS for $20 off your first purchase. Download the GameTime app today. And what time is it? It's game time. All right, Pistons fall to the Hornets. Heartbreaker on this one, because it was a nice comeback from the Pistons, who trailed by 20 in the second half. Let me check. I believe it was 20. Don't quote. Trailed by a lot, that's for sure. But were able to come all the way back and even force overtime, but could not get it done in the end. Now, I want to take your comments. So if you got them, use that comment feature, and we will get right into it and then discuss the Cade Cunningham injury. Daniel Berry Sports Highlights says, yo, with the fire emoji sign. Yeah, Brandon Miller was really good tonight. I mean, my goodness, 38 points, 15 of 26 from the floor, 8 of 12 from the long line, and that just killed the Pistons time after time after time. And between Lamelo Ball and Brandon Miller, some of these three-pointers were like horse shots in the driveway. I mean, the one that Lamelo Ball had at the buzzer in the third quarter, I mean, I don't know if it was Johnny Kane or Greg Kessler that said, I'm done. Oh, mercy. Something like that. It was, I mean, not funny, because, you're watching the opposition make these ridiculous threes, but you're just throwing your hands up like, no way. Unbelievable. But yeah, Brandon Miller was really, really good. Demetrius McNeil says defending the three-point shooting has burned the Pistons this week. That's another overtime loss on the road. Indeed, it is. And what makes it more unfortunate for the Pistons is those were both winnable games in terms of the Bulls and the Hornets. When you had the I guess you would call it the inability to defend the 3-point line. Not I guess that's exactly what you'd call it. And I think Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball are more formidable players than what and maybe that's not fair to say in comparison to Vujicic and LaMelo Ball and the guys. I'm sorry, and for the Bulls, why am I blanking? Zach LaVine, and the guys that got hot for the Bulls, but for the Hornets tonight, it was just like it's like watching a train wreck. You can't take your eyes off it. And for the Pistons, unfortunately, guys just got hot, and that was part of the 123-121 defeat. Hornets outscored the Pistons 14-12 in that overtime session, but that fourth quarter is where the Pistons made their mark in their comeback, outscoring the Hornets 30-16 to get back into this one and force overtime. So overall, I mean, nobody, and again, I don't know how many times I can stress, nobody is in the business of moral victories. This one is a tough pill to swallow because, again, you think the Hornets were a team that you could beat, and they absolutely are. And you've now lost two, the first one being a buzzer beater, and then the second one in overtime, 2 games to a 6-9 team that I think, quite frankly, the Pistons are just the better basketball team. All right. Cade Cunningham injury. It thought at first it was a tailbone injury, and later on the FanDuel Sports Network, I believe, yes, I'm saying that right. I got to make sure I have my branding's changed so many times. Fox to Bally, now FanDuel Sports Network, reported that it is a hip injury. He's going to undergo some further testing to get a diagnosis. I don't think there's anything immediate as far as a timeline or what to expect. And I'm continuing to browse Twitter and looking around and not seeing anything specific. I'm sure we're going to hear more in the coming days or even the coming hours. But man, that was it happened on the towards the end of the game there when he made those 2 free throws with about a minute and a half left. That was part of that 10-0 run, and the Hornets actually challenged the foul on it. They thought the defender, I forget who it was, but the challenge was that the defender was straight up, and it was not a successful challenge. It was ruled a foul, and that's why Cade got the free throws. But unfortunate that he couldn't play in overtime, no doubt about it. All right, we've got a few more comments to get to, and then we will close it out with studs and duds. And we got, it looks like a Hornets fan tuning in, which, hey, no problem. Hornets missing their center, power forward, and backup center. Hornets greater than Pistons. They were tonight, and they especially were in that third quarter. But the Pistons better team in the fourth quarter. Hornets outlasting Detroit for the win in this one. Final score in the ball game, 123-121. So we'll tie a bow on it with studs and duds, the final portion of the Locked On Pistons postcast. That's coming up next. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned in to the Locked On Pistons postcast. Back in just a moment. Hey, this episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by Chime. That's right. Let me tell you a little bit about Chime because, listen, it's something we could all use. We've all hit a point where we realize it was time to make some serious money moves, right? It's time to grow up. It's time to take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. That's all possible on Chime. Check out chime.com/NBA. Now listen, here's how it works. Chime helps you make progress with fee-free overdraft protection up to $200. Your next deposit is applied to your balance. You can get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. There's no monthly fees or maintenance fees. And get this, guys, over 50,000 fee-free ATM. Nothing worse than going to an ATM. You see that fee attached to it, and you're like, what the heck is going on? Listen, Chime is a financial institution with a sense of community. They care about their members, just like we care about our Locked On podcast viewers. We care at Chime. They care about their members. It's a sense of community. You set up your direct deposit in your Chime account, and after a qualifying direct deposit of $200 or more, Chime will notify you to enroll in SpotMe. With an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to $200 when you exceed your balance. Your next direct deposit is applied to your negative balance. Chime never charges fees or interest for using SpotMe. Make your fall finances a little greener by working towards your financial goals with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Chime feels like progress. All right, final segment of the program where we talk about our studs and our duds. If you got one, let me know in the comments. It's a heartbreaker in overtime for the Pistons, 123-121. And for me, the studs, again, it's just like the other night when I'm forced to talk about the opposition because, my goodness, Brandon Miller, 38 points, 8 of 12 from three-point land, 15 of 26 from the floor, and Lamelo Ball right behind him, 35 points, 4 of 14 from three, but he was 7 of 8 from the foul line and 12 of 27 from the floor. He added 9 assists. Now, the plus-minus isn't something, you go crazy about per se, but when you look at the Pistons plus-minus from the starters, guys like Tobias Harris, -7, Tim Hardaway Jr., -24, Jalen Duren, -17, Cade Cunningham, -3, Jaden Ivey, -10. The Pistons bench kept them in this game tonight. And again, plus minus isn't everything, but the performance off the bench from guys like Malik Beasley, Isaiah Stewart was good. Even Fontecchio was good with 8 points, but he was plus 19 when he was on the floor. Ronald Holland was +7, Isaiah Stewart +10, Malik Beasley +11, Marcus Sasser +3. You get the point. Wendell Moore Jr. +1, and he played 21 minutes. So despite the Pistons mounting that comeback and getting it to overtime, it was the bench that really outperformed the starters tonight. And there's a lot of different metrics to look at that would confirm that. But, 50 points from the bench tonight, really, really impressive work all the way around. And again, all those guys in plus as opposed to the starters who are all in minus. So what I'm getting at that I probably should have started with, my duds are the Pistons starters altogether, and my studs for the Pistons will be the bench performance tonight because the Pistons bench was really, really good and really helped bring them back and then eventually get this one to overtime. So that being said, this is one you would have loved to have, and it's a heartbreaker, especially with how you felt like maybe in overtime you make a couple more plays. Even I hate to go back to regulation, but it's not the same thing as Ron Holland missing a couple of free throws and then losing the game to Milwaukee. But it had the feeling of, as you were entering overtime, man, you just watch victory slip away at the end of regulation because in this case, Malik Beasley had 2 really good looks at the rim, but could not get them to go. That being said, Pistons will be back in action on Saturday. So that will be our next Locked On Pistons postcast as the Pistons, I believe yes, it is the Magic. Just wanted to make sure. So they are on the road in Orlando, taking on the Orlando Magic. We'll have a Locked On Pistons postcast after that. It's a 7:00 tip, so we'll be on the air after that. In the meantime, you got to check out Locked On Pistons with Koo on the daily. And of course, the Locked On Sports Detroit will also have a Locked On Lions postcast on Sunday and a Locked On Wolverines postcast on Saturday. So busy weekend coming up. That's why you subscribe to Locked On Sports Detroit. And again, as a reminder, let's not forget, this is an extension of the Locked On Podcast Network, and it's your post-game coverage. So if you're looking for a place to rap about the game post-game, we had a great time doing this with the Tigers and hope to continue to build the post-game audience for both the Lions and the Pistons and the Michigan Wolverines. It just continue rapping Detroit sports. So thanks again, as always, for tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma, and we will see you next time. But before we let you go, got to remind you that your favorite podcast now is a newsletter. You got to check out the Locked On Pistons daily newsletter. It's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it's delivered right to your inbox. So sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Locked On Sports Detroit.